I open my DMs, my Twitter, my email, various other places people can contact me, and I see a bunch of the same message. Hey Brodie, have you heard of XLibre? Hey Brodie, did you know that Xorg got forked into XLibre? Hey Brodie, you should make a video on XLibre. Yes, I heard you. I know what XLibre is. And yes, we're here to talk about it. About 4 months ago, I put out this video. One Xorg developer tried to revive development. The mad lad actually did it. This was happening directly in the Xorg repo, where basically we had a graph that looked something like... That's the wrong direction. Something like this. So normally, Xorg development spiked around 2008, and then basically just plummeted from there. Little jumps in a couple of years, but not really that much. And then 2024 happened, and that was higher than, their 2016 numbers, almost at their 2013 numbers. This is by no means their peak, but it was way higher than where it was. And this wasn't a sudden reinvigoration by the community where everybody's like, I'm gonna start supporting Xorg, Xorg's gonna be great. This was one guy. There were other people working on the project, doing the work they normally do, and then all of this extra work, one guy. In that year, 63% of the commits were by a single person, Enrico Weigelt. But as this was just a single year of it happening, I kind of just moved past it, didn't really talk much more about it from there because, sometimes you have developers come along, do a bit of work for a little bit, and then just vanish into the ether. That's not what happened here, though. This story has evolved quite a bit since things first kicked off, but here we have XLibre, whatever you want to call it, a fork of the Xorg server. And not a fork by somebody who has no idea what they're doing, a fork that's just a protest, it's not really gonna go anywhere. This is a fork created by the current most prolific developer of the Xorg server, Enrico Weigelt, otherwise known in various places as Metux. This is the person who caused the spike in development. This is the person doing the most work on Xorg in the modern era. But it did not start its life here. Much like Xorg, it was being hosted over on the free desktop GitLab for a very, very brief amount of time until it was removed. But not just removed. Also, Enrico's account was very shortly after banned from the free desktop GitLab. Not only that, it gets even better. Here we have the regular Xorg server where work certainly gets done sparingly. About a week ago was the latest patch. Then we have one before that and various other patches that happen sometimes throughout the year. But let's go over to the merge requests and go to the closed section. Enrico Weigelt. Enrico Weigelt, 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 Enrico Weigelt. Keeps going on and on and on. There are other ones in here, just not many of them. We can't search by author because when someone is banned, they get removed from the author list, but we can search by the string of his name. 112 are currently marked as closed. Now, annoyingly, somebody went and tagged every single one of these before I made the video, so I can't show you the actual time it was closed in this list here. But all of these commits were closed at the same time. Obviously, minus the ones that may have been closed like a year or so back, just because, they're not important patches or didn't really fit the project, things like that. So I can blame Pro Bono for breaking my timestamps, explain why the merge requests were closed. This is a link to every single one of them that was closed. That's why all of the timestamps are broken. Keeps going, there we go. Now, the answer from the project is the author has been banned after decision of the Free Desktop Code of Conduct Committee. Closing the merge request was not a direct action, but an indirect consequence of deleting the forked repository. GitLab closes related merge requests when a repository is deleted. Fair enough. What is not explained is why the ban took place. I have my theories, but as tends to be the case in the FOSS world, anytime a COC committee is involved, basically transparency be damned, be as opaque as possible, destroy your reputation as much as possible, let people run wild with whatever theories they want to do, because that's the way we do it in the FOSS world. Before we get to that though, I do want to address the very obvious truth in the room. And that's the fact that the most prolific modern Xorg developer was banned from the project shortly after making a fork. And let's be honest, that's where a lot of people are going to stop reading. A lot of people don't read past the title. A lot of people don't look into the details. So, if I'm being honest, this may be the best advertisement the project is ever going to get. Because it doesn't matter if anything is true here. This is everything that certain people have believed, all coming true at once. There are people out there who think that Red Hat is trying to destroy Xorg, that Wayland is being forced upon them, that Xorg developers are intentionally holding the project back to make it so you have to use Wayland. And it doesn't matter if any of this is true, because it looks true when somebody gets banned shortly after forking the project. I know there are people involved in Free Desktop that watch this channel. I want you to be aware that this was the biggest mistake that you have ever made. You don't understand the amount of force you've created behind this project. Even if that was not your intention, you have given it life. With all that being said, let's talk about the very possible reason why he was banned. Because in this case, look, it might be a secret from the COC committee, but I think it's pretty obvious if you read what's happening in the project, why it happened. So here we have the XLibre repo. Let's have a look at where is the README file. Let's go to the version prior to the recent change, this one right here. And let's go and browse the files. XLibre's project fork of the Xorg server with lots of code cleanups and enhanced functionality. That fork was necessary since toxic elements within Xorg projects, moles from certain big corps are boycotting any substantial work on Xorg in order to destroy the project, to eliminate competition of their own products, classic embrace, extend, extinguish tactics. We're off to a great start. We're off to a fantastic start. Remember, the project was being hosted on Free Desktop, and we're basically just trashing Free Desktop. This is an independent project, not at all affiliated with big tech or any of their subsidiaries or tax evasion tools, nor any political activist groups, state actors, etc. It's explicitly free of any DEI or similar discriminatory policies. Anybody who's treating others nicely is welcomed. I'm not going to tell you what your political stance should be. You're an adult. You can work it out for yourself. Go watch somebody else's channel if you want them to tell you how to think. But let's just be honest here, right? If your hosting is being provided by Free Desktop, and then you start calling them a bunch of corpo shills, state actors, and racists, I can understand why they might not want to provide you hosting. Whether you agree or disagree with his stance here, completely irrelevant. Antagonizing your hosting provider generally doesn't go too well. I don't know of any cases it goes well. If you know of one, I would like to be proven wrong, but it especially is not going to go well in the FOSS world. However, that is not the only problem. Whilst Enrico may be the most prolific Xorg developer in the modern era of the project, with even more work being done than the last time I made a video about all of the work he was doing, already being the largest developer in the project, that doesn't mean there hasn't been issues with some of the work. When you do a lot of work and you're a single person doing a lot of work, especially on an old spaghetti code base, there can be changes you make where you're not entirely sure that things entirely work. And there have been a number of cases like this. Xorg Git broke again. Current Xorg master boots up to a frozen screen with nowhere to interact with the system even though the clock is running. I'm bisecting it manually and will update once I have a working version. Metux, I appreciate you maintaining and trying to improve Xorg, but this is the second time you break it recently and you really should implement more testing. So there's a bit of a thread here, various other people talk about it, and we have this. For the public record, we've cleared this up via chat at the weekend. David Bepo belongs to the users building directly from master because we're lacking actual releases. Many people out there don't seem to be aware that ABIs might change and thus recompile is necessary. 1679, that being X386 drop XF86 message verb in favor of log message verb turned an actual function into a macro. External drivers need to be recompiled. Those will work with previous Xserver versions, otherwise can't be loaded due to missing symbol. Since Xserver couldn't load the input driver, the console became unusable, and even raising ABI X input version wouldn't have helped here, what we currently need to do before the next release. The next release. Since the consequence will be the same, input driver can't be loaded, thus no input. Here are the lessons learned. We need actual new releases, so distro/downstreams don't need to rely on potentially unstable master branches. We need better documentation for downstreams, how to use unreleased/master branch correctly. We need better collaboration with distro/downstreams, and we should rethink ABI matching mechanisms and clearly differentiate between ABI and API. Maybe generate some keys and place drivers into subders per ABI key. With a final comment here from Jasper St. Pierre. Honestly, I would strongly recommend just not merging anything Metux does from now on. I do not feel their presence here has been a net positive. I have seen zero actual bugs solved by any of their code changes. What I have seen is build breakage, ABI breakage, and ecosystem churn from moving code around and deleting code. Xorg could use some actual maintenance, but that means fixing actual bugs and solving real problems. So there was already this underlying thread of people not entirely being happy with the work that Enrico is producing. And if that work is buggy, I can understand that. And here we have a much more recent case. Xrandr doesn't work anymore on Xorg Git. After the recent commits, Xrandr no longer works, also KDE Kscreen fails. I tried installing libxrandr and Xrandr from Git, but Xrandr remains blocked without any output. And this one evolved into quite a bit larger discussion. So, you know, just a few comments. This is turning a bit into a Wayland protocol discussion. As with last time, this got bisected to a change made by Enrico Weigelt, with this comment under it saying, do you actually test your changes before submitting them upstream? Then there was a discussion about getting the reversion done, and this comment here. I think this particular situation is a bit different. I am aware that some people from Xorg development team thinks that Metux changes are not useful enough for various reasons, e.g. risk of breakage, Xorg is dead anyway, etc., and should probably not be merged. I think this is not a problem as long as no one is adversely affected and it's only me who spends my time reviewing code. This is all fine and good as long as no one needs to spend time caring about the changes. However, it's a problem once someone needs to spend time bisecting critical regressions. Xrandr being broken the way that we configure displays on Xorg is a pretty critical regression, discussing and creating fixes, etc. The submitter is one to blame, yes, but I personally share similar level of responsibility because I accepted the merge request as the problem would not have existed had I not merged the MR. And in direct response to that from Michael Denzer, apologies for being blunt, but I'm afraid it's more like everyone except you by now. He's managed to fall out with pretty much every other active project member. Regarding Xorg is dead anyway, that's not a reason for me though. I actually feel bad for Xorg users. Enrico's churn is causing pain for them for no clear benefit. Jasper's comment we saw earlier sums up that particular concern, which is far from the only concern with Enrico's conduct in this project quite well. It's not that simple. See this other comment from Jasper, and other review comments by Jasper on Enrico's merge requests. How confident are you that none of the hundreds of merge commits by Enrico introduce similar subtle and potentially security relevant bugs? Okay, I will not merge any changes that have any chance of breaking for the time being. I want to start working on branching off and releasing Xserver 25.1 at some point soon. We will have actual data on how many actual regressions have been caused by Enrico's work in some months. Now that thread continued down its own path for quite a while, but I want to jump ahead to a later comment made by Michael Denzer down, I believe, right here. In case anyone thinks I'm overreacting here, consider the timeline. So that merge request was merged on February 24th, this issue filed on February 25th. Since the MR above was merged the day before and modified random code, it's an obvious candidate for causing a regression. Enrico is directly notified of the regressing commit in that comment here on February 27th. Enrico creates 3 new merge requests, pushes commits to other merge requests, and updates another thing, which results in 1840 being merged, and possibly this and this being merged as well. At this point, Enrico hasn't so much as acknowledged the existence of this regression, let alone shared at least a plan for fixing it. It seems like fixing regressions wasn't very high on his list of priorities. To me, this is not an appropriate reaction to this kind of regression, and it's not the first time. See this comment over here. So this is an earlier regression, and Michael said, given your utter lack of cooperation here, I'm inclined to just revert any future changes causing major regressions like this, and then you can try again. He responds by saying, WTF, am I not allowed being absent a few days? Which Michael responded to by saying, that's not the issue. We waited almost 3 weeks for you to address our review feedback, and you were pushing changes to other merge requests during that time. Meanwhile, more and more users were hitting the regression. That's not an appropriate reaction to such a regression. Now, I will say, this is normal behavior in the FOSS world. You don't know how many open merge requests I have seen where there is review feedback on them and people are just working in other projects, working in other merge requests, and it sits open for like 7 years, right? Like regressions being open for that long. Yes, I understand this is annoying, and yes, having it go over and over and over again in different cases is annoying, but this is just how the FOSS world works. People are not being paid to do this work. They're going to work on the things they want to work on. It is absolutely annoying, but this is what you signed up for, wanting to work in the FOSS world. And you know what? Even the person who reported the issue thought he was way out of line here. This is a totally unfounded accusation. I say this as the user who reported the bug. In other similarly used projects, I've seen regressions or similar severity or even worse without any fixes for weeks or months, with the developers annoyed telling me to use the stable version without bothering them because they had a plan, which obviously never materialized. Enrico's behavior was absolutely beyond reproach. And then Enrico chimed in. Wait a second. I've become aware of that issue yesterday evening and then directly took care of it. I'm in direct contact with the person who reported it and we're working together on fixing the problem. Note that I'm not in the luxury of having a well-paid position in a large corporation where I can take care of FOSS projects all day. I'm doing that in my spare time. This is obviously a jab at Michael for being an employee of Red Hat. Since you're demanding enterprise-grade SLA reaction times from me, which FOSS/volunteer projects offer that? And not on release maintenance branch, but on master. You do know why such SLAs aren't anything but cheap. Why does a regression in master branch affect anybody outside the dev team at all? Maybe because there haven't been any releases for Aeons. So people are so desperate, they have to directly use the work in progress master branch instead. Why haven't there been any new releases for Aeons? Or more precisely, why are certain people here so keen on not having any new releases? Openly stated several times here, at all. Does anybody have a strategic/political interest in stopping Xorg from evolving? Summing up all your comments you've made on my MRs, it really seems to have enough time for sitting around and looking whether I'm doing anything wrong, just to blame. And that became worse once I've, God forbid, openly discussing actual new features. Maybe I'm just overreacting, but to me and also to other observers, it feels like it's a capital heresy even considering new features. Now, Michael eventually brought himself back in when he realized it wasn't actually 2 days the regression had been reported, it was 16 hours. Firstly, 2 days is not at all a problem for the FOSS world. As I said, there have been things that existed for way longer than that, but 16 hours, literally less than a day, and he had already addressed it. And the one person that seems to like Enrico in the project, I would argue that overall Enrico's response time was as good as could possibly be. We cannot be sure that tagging in a comment will result in immediate action given the volume of the emails, so it would be reasonable to retract the accusation, which I guess kinda was done, but never really done. At least not publicly. So what is very clear to me is there are people in the Xorg project that don't like Enrico, and Enrico doesn't like a lot of people in the Xorg project. Basically, there are these tensions going on, and they've been going on for a very long time. arguably for valid reasons, right? Like, I get it. Enrico wants to make a lot of changes. He feels like the project has been stagnant for a very long time. At the same time, a lot of the Xorg team feels like the changes he's making aren't really that significant. They're introducing regressions, they're introducing bugs, and it'd be better to move a bit slower, but still maybe bring those in. I understand, but for the sake of everybody involved, this was not something which was going to be resolved by just talking it out. This is one of those rare cases where I think forking the project actually is the correct response. And you know what? It kinda reminds me of the formation of the Xorg project itself. This started as a fork of the X386 project. At the time, there were a lot of people really unhappy with the direction of the project. There was this kind of like gatekeepery good boys club where if you didn't get along with the core maintainers, they didn't want anything to do with you. They would just kick you out of the project. A number of people got banned, and it was a giant mess when it was happening. The thing that really killed X386, though, is they tried to change from a permissive license to a non-GPL compatible license, and back then, the FSF had a lot more power, people really cared about them, and if the FSF wasn't happy with you, basically everyone wasn't happy with you, and that eventually led to the formation of this Xorg fork. And at this point, Enrico feels like he wants to do a lot of work, but the upstream project, the main project, is kind of stifling that work, and he couldn't get in the changes he wanted to do. Because it wasn't just these little changes where it doesn't really matter. He wants to make some big sweeping changes to Xorg. He wants to basically reinvigorate it and make it, you know, a standard that keeps going long into the future. And that was just not going to happen with Xorg. There's a lot of people who just maybe not want to stop it. I don't necessarily think that's the correct messaging, but don't really care, right? Most people have moved on to Wayland, and Wayland is the thing they mainly care about supporting. So full-on Xorg changes, new features, all this stuff, just don't really fit with the direction they really want to go. A fork makes sense there. Now, I do think going with this DEI messaging isn't really that useful, because what's going to happen is they're going to like laser focus on that specific phrase, look at nothing else happening, and it's going to waste a lot of people's time just looking at this specific thing being said. But overall, I can't really fault the effort. I can't fault someone who is an active developer, the most active developer, who is not happy with a project and wants to just fork it and do it themselves. But what do you think? Do you think this is a giant waste of effort? Do you care about Xorg still? Do you still use Xorg? Or have you gone full Wayland? I would love to know. And do you think anything's actually going to come out of this XLibre project? Do you think it's going to eventually make its way into distros and kind of replace Xorg in the same way that X386 was replaced by Xorg itself? I'd love to know. So if you liked the video, go like the video. If you really liked the video and you want to become one of these amazing people over here, check out the Patreon, subscribe, XLibre, link in the description down below. That's going to be it for me, and I am very interested to see where this goes.